Hey guys, I'm Tyler and welcome back to another Learn the Logic series video, a series where I usually talk about something I built and why I built it that way. Today's going to be a little bit different. Today we're going to talk about dust collection on the table saw. The reason I'm doing this video in the Learn the Logic series format is I've gotten a lot of questions about how I combat dust collection on a table saw, which, as a lot of you guys know, can be a little bit complicated. There's lots of areas on a table saw where dust can get out, and especially on a contractor style table saw like this one, active dust collection is not actually built into it. It's something that I had to add. Not super difficult, it works pretty well, but with the motor hanging out of the back of this unit, as it is with I think all contractor table saws, getting dust collection around the belt that is going to be moving back and forth when you miter the saw blade is very, very tricky. And we will talk about that when we get around to the back of the saw. I think I'm just going to abandon the typical questions that I usually ask on the Learn the Logic because this one is just so different. I'll just talk to you guys, share what I did on this one, so hopefully you can do this on your contractor saw as well. Let's start looking up underneath the table first at the top of the saw, and we'll work our way down from there with the different things that I encountered. As you can see right here, I have filled all of the potential open areas with insulation. So between the box or the cabinet itself and the table saw, there's just some fiberglass insulation stuffed up in there to close the gap that was wide open up there. And this prevents any dust from leaking out on the side and getting all over the floor. Moving around to the back of the saw, which this is typically 100% wide open here, so you can see where I added some probably 1/8" plywood and a couple spacers to close gaps and try to close in the whole back. Now with the contractor style table saw, the belt and this whole motor mechanism bevel up into this area, so you got to leave that open. You can probably close this in with some saw stash style materials. I haven't had the time to add that, and quite frankly I found it's worked well enough so far. I don't know what improvements that might add. Because it is a saw stash, it's technically just like a broom hanging there and wide open. I don't know that it would actually direct more suction towards the blade, which is where you want your airflow coming down from to grab all that dust. So personally, I don't think I'm going to be adding the saw stash. Maybe it would be a good experiment, but right now this works pretty well. Now moving down underneath the saw itself, this is like an angled hopper that I added with a fitting for a flexible dust collection hose. I get these flexible dust collection hoses from Menards. They are, I believe, $20 for a 10-foot section. But this was just some pieces of plywood that I glued together, and it sits on a frame, so the whole thing actually just sets inside the cabinet, and I can lift that whole thing out if I needed to. I believe I can actually get it out without taking the table off, just by twisting it around, and finagling with it to get it out of there. This has a cut in half union for the sewer and drain PVC that I use for all of the dust collection, and the flexible piping just happens to pinch right in there, and that is just glued onto the hopper itself with some construction adhesive. Another thing that I probably should have mentioned at the beginning is this saw had 0 active dust collection on it. It had that angled tray in the bottom where the heavier dust would fall onto and slide onto the floor, but that was it. I would imagine though that newer contractor style saws will have something. Maybe it's just a shop vac fitting around the blade itself for a little bit of active dust collection, but I highly doubt it's as good as a 4 or 6-inch system connected to a high-powered blower like we have here. Another thing I want to mention is the style of blade you use greatly affects the amount of dust that's thrown back at you and that is thrown on top of the table as well. You need to make sure you have a tooth pattern on your blade that can collect the chips and throw them down into the saw instead of spinning them all the way around the blade and throwing them back at you. So pay attention to the tooth patterns on there. I personally have found I get the best dust collection with a combination style blade, which has some bigger grooves in it to gather that dust and throw it down into the saw. Well, there you are, guys. I hope that helped some of you out and answered some of the questions I've been getting lately. A quick summary of what I've done: insulation around the cabinet and the table of the box to close in the upper portion as much as you possibly can. I used some 1/8" plywood to close in the back as much as I could with the contractor style saw that needs that big opening. I made a dust hopper in the bottom of the saw with a port for an active dust collection system. And then you want to pay attention to your blade pattern to be able to collect most of that dust and throw it down into the saw instead of back at you. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hammer that thumbs up button, helps us out a ton. Hit the subscribe button right over there so you never miss when we upload a new video. I'm DIY Tyler, and you guys have a good one.